This is going to be a basic video for Business Center 3.4. What we are going to do is just cover some of the tabs across the top. We'll walk through some of the startup page tab options, and then we'll build a base template that we can use for when we say file new. It has some of our settings, maybe some of our layers that we like to use. So when you open up Business Center 3.4, you're going to get the start page, and you'll have the menu, the ribbon across the top, and across the very top you have some tabs that you can change. That changes the ribbons for that particular module, and across the top you have some quick shortcuts. So a couple things we like to do when you first install Business Center 3.4, or if we do an update, we'd go over to support and we would go to options. So go over to the support tab and go to options. A few things that I like to check on right up front is startup and display. We would actually have some highlight color, cursor color, things like that. We actually have this set as the default, and that is a typical setting how we like to work when we're in Business Center. Project management, over on the left, you can pick what project management is where certain folders are located. And one nice thing in 3.4 is the save project reminder. So if you check the reminder and set it for an interval, I have mine set at 15. It comes default at 60, so we'll set this to 15. So support options are not set per the template. Support options are just set general for all files, or if we set it in our beginning and then we save a file out, the use project subfolders and things like that are held per use. But these two options are typically checked, and what this does is it creates a subfolder of the project you're in, and if you have the copy imported files to import folder, it will actually pull everything in and have a backup of the files used in the project. I do not use that. I like to leave it unchecked because we have a location where we store all our information. You can walk down through. File locations is where you would find your synchronizer data folder, where it syncs your projects from a collector if you're using a collector or a tablet. A few other things that you might check: if you're using a digitizer, you could set your digitizer setup to map your buttons and so forth. But for the most part, the startup and display, if you want it to start up in a start page, or if you want, and set in project management is what we'd use this for. So we'll say OK. So on the start page, some things you might note is across the middle here, if your start page is closed, let's just say this: if we close our start page and nothing is a blank screen, we can go to support and go to start page. So sometimes people lose that and we want to get it back. On the start page, you can actually go down through and pick these buttons here, and you'll notice the ribbon will change for the actual option that I pick. So if I pick data prep, I get my data prep tabs that kind of pertain to doing data prep project. If I do site takeoff, I start now get my takeoff and my site mass haul. So if you use construction, it would load almost all of them. One way to load everything is to go to the support tab, scratch that, and go back to the project tab and go to set menu layout right here. So project tab, set menu layout, and you can actually go to all commands right here. So pick it, the all commands, say load menu, and it will load all of the commands. So there are some tabs that pertain only to survey, such as survey, and photogrammetry would pertain to the photogrammetry module. And when we talk about modules, that comes up a lot when we have to use a USB key or we have a network key. To get to see what you're using, go to support, go to about Business Center, and then go to license. And that actually shows you what you are using, and you can see what modules you have over here on the left. So if we close these, you can see the different modules that are on this particular USB key that I have on my computer. So say okay there. One thing to note too is to check your warranty expiration. So when your warranty is going to expire for this particular USB key. And when that expires, that means you can't do any updates after this expires. So if you keep this current, all updates given in Business Center HCE would be able to be updated. Also, coming back to the start page, if you are going to do updates, you can do check for updates. You have to be on the internet, obviously. And it'll check for updates, and no updates available. Another one that we like to use is the tours and tutorials. If you click on the tours and tutorials, it will load up the Trimble Connected community and have all the base projects, some sample data, and PDFs to walk through. Now, not all this is current. Some of it is outdated compared to the version, but if you can get through some of the command locations where they may have changed, but if you walk through it, some of the processes still pertain, some of the commands are still available, so it's good to walk through the tours and tutorials. We can close this. Another one is the workflow guide. The workflow guide will actually pull up the different wizards. If you scroll down under the workflow guide, it opens up a new tab. Scroll down. What am I going to do today? Well, I am going to do site takeoff, PDF based. And what it does is it allows you to, it pulls up a step process to walk you through each option. So if you go to next, you'll go import files, and then it always has a next for each one to go through. So let's close this. We'll see this again when we get to start a new project. So let's start a base project. So we're going to go up to project or file, and we're going to go file new. And when we go to file new, I like to always use the US survey foot in the States, and very rarely would we use international feet, and we have not done very many metric jobs in the States, at least in our territory. So US survey foot, I'm going to set that as the default for now, and we'll say OK. It'll pull up the plan view. Over on the left, you'll see the Project Explorer, and if you'll notice down here at the bottom, on base installation, it should give you both tabs. If for some reason these tabs are not there, we can actually come up here to the very top to the quick buttons, and we can uncheck View Filter. We can uncheck Project Explorer, and they're not unchecking. Well, let's just close them out. So now we have everything closed. To get them back, we come up here and we can check them, highlight them, and now they're in the list down here. So another option I like to have is the coordinate scroll. So the coordinate scroll can give you northern and eastern elevation on certain things. It's good to have open. And to turn the coordinate scroll on, or the coordinate pane, is to come down here in this far right hand bottom corner and put a checkbox. That box is actually, when you first install, it'll be open like this. So if you move your cursor around or your pick box, you can see that it will show you northern and eastern. I like to keep mine down below here, so what you can do is you can drag these boxes, pick on it, and hold the left mouse key down, and you can drag it down to where you can see it start to put the shadow in, and then let go up on the left mouse button, and it'll stay there. So Project Explorer is where it'll keep track of imported files, keep track of surfaces you build, keep track of points that you create. If you create corridors or alignments, it'll be in the list. You can go to the View Filter Manager, and you can look at layers, and you can set filter control. Filter is like a layer state, so you can have different layers turned off or on and save it as a filter, and then you can pull that filter back up. Down below, you can go to the point tab on the View Filter Manager, and you can turn your point IDs off, point symbols off or on, and feature code and elevation, so forth. Display options is something you may use, so if you import in a CAD file and you want to see if there are certain items that are elevated, if certain items are zero elevation, you can step down through it and it'll apply a filter to where things have a different color or don't show at all if there's no three-dimensional data in it. So what I want to do is, these are the base layers that it creates. Layer 0 is always there, drill plans is always there, points are always there, and text are always there. So if these are always options in the base install of Business Center, we can modify and add to. So let's go ahead and right click on one of these and say layer options. So we're going to right click on a layer and say layer options. And over on the right, it'll pull up the command window, and it should be docked. So what you can do in this is it shows the layers, and it shows 0 as protected, drill plans, shows points as protected. Points means, when it's protected, means that it's you can't delete from it. So the items there are there, and you can't delete it. So what are on there is kind of a locked layer. So I want to get rid of text, and actually I got rid of my drill plan layer as well. So actually, I'm sorry, I picked the unprotected layer. So now I only have 0 and points. So let's go ahead and create a new layer. And a layer we like to use here is, I like to use, is 3D break lines. So I'm going to say 3D space break lines. And I like to create the color orange. So I'll hit the down arrow here and make it orange. Line weight and layer group we'll not get into, and I don't want to protect it because I will be adding to and removing items from this. So we'll say okay. So we just added a layer. So you'll notice over on the left we have 3D break lines. So let's go ahead and close this. So let's go up and go through some project settings. So let's go up to the project tab, and right below there is project settings. The project settings, you can set a variety of things, but when we said file new and we selected US survey feet, a lot of things just came in set based off a template that Trimble put in on the installation. If you over on the left, if you walk down through, you got company information. You can put the company information, name, and then when you create reports and so forth, it'll add this information. User information can be added if you had some survey crews, different things, or the office user. You can add that information. Coordinate system. Coordinate system is where you would add in if say you wanted to add in a state plane coordinate system, like an Illinois West or Illinois East, you can actually hit change, hit coordinate system, hit change, and you can pick your system right here. So if it's a coordinate system and zone, if it's a calibrated site, if ones that you had saved in the coordinate system manager, or if it's a default projection. So we're not going to set that in our base project because we don't want that to be stuck on every job or from here on out. So we're going to leave this alone. But if you actually import in a DC file from a calibration, or a cal from a calibration you did in SCS, it'll change this information to match that controller if you set it to do that. So go ahead and down through there, we'll hit units, and if we click on units and coordinates, we'll see we're in northeast elevation. Latitude and longitude is out to 5 decimal places. Coordinates are to 3, elevations are to 3, and we are showing trailing zeros. You can step down through and set some other criteria if you want, but the one thing I want to check, if you go to distance, you want to make sure you are in US survey feet. And you can check some other options there. Other things that you may want to look at is the area and the volume. So it'll measure your display area in square feet and alternate in acreage. And you can see the precisions there. And likewise in volume, you can measure in cubic yard and so forth. So the one thing that we like to change is we go to view and we go to display options. And under the view there's a lot of settings, but the display options, we are going to change how the lines are labeled with elevation and how our line string shows our vertical and horizontal nodes. So when you get in there, we're going to look at line markers, and I'll show you an example of this before we quit. We'll go to segment endpoints. We want to make sure that shows, and large deflections, which is new in 3.4, we'll go ahead and say show. And segment endpoints, we want to show them, and vertical points of intersection, we want to show them. So over on the left, we're going to continue to scroll down. Another thing we like to look at is computations. And if you come down to the first one is takeoff, you might want to check this. So topsoil offset method, it is vertical, and gap closure tolerances for your area-based perimeters is 0.1. So you may want to change this. We leave our topsoil method offset vertical. If you're doing some large side slope like a landfill slopes, you might want to select that to be perpendicular, but we're going to leave it at vertical. If you go to corridors, some things that you might want to check is maximum sampling distance on the first creation of the surface. It would look at 25 feet, which is sufficient, and we may tie that or change that. Template instructions, honor sign of tie slope is new in 3.4. You typically would know is how it used to be in normal older versions. You may want to change that to yes. It overrides and controls if you're doing a cut if you're wanting to force to do a cut in a ditch section and it's in a fill. So it can force the sign. If you put a negative, it'll force it and make it perform a cut in a possible fill section. So on the left, we'll check down. We'll go down to surface. And a couple things that we like to change in here is the first one is you'll see horizontal tolerance, vertical tolerance. We'll make sure that's 0.05. That is what Trimble Business Center or Business Center Heavy Construction Edition is defaults to. Maximum sampling distance is the one we like to change. So we do not want this to be 100,000 or 1 million. We like this in our office to be 12.5. So what that means is along a straight line, it'll put a vertice or look at that line and break it up into segments at 12.5 feet. So when you're looking at like sheet grading across the parking lot, that setting makes a much smoother grading process across a parking lot. And we can look at an example when we're done. Maximum edge length, this is how far out it's going to create triangles on the initial surface. We like to set that down to about 125. Another one that you may change is adjust flat triangles, and we'll go ahead and change it. So adjust flat triangles is something you want to definitely pay attention to if you're doing some swell grading. So if you got some contours that are graded into a swell with a shallow ditch, it would actually interpolate across the contours and possibly create a flat triangle. And whereas that swell should be a constant slope, it may create more of a step, kind of a step sequence. So you might want to pay attention to that. Anything else in here? There's a ton of settings in here. Just be kind of cautious on some of the settings, especially if you're going to get into some of the baseline processing, survey processes. But for the most part, for basic data prep or creating surface models, what we just showed you, what we just changed would be sufficient. So we'll say OK. We're actually into our 15-minute set reminder. So I don't want to save this, but it would ask us. I want to say no. So we have created a layer. We set some project settings. We can actually do several items in here, but let's go ahead and save this and use it as a template. So we're going to go up to File, and we're going to say Save Project as Template. And it's pulled up the project templates, and we're going to say, I want to say Site Tech, MW, and I'll say US Survey Feet. US Survey Foot. And I want to say Save Project as Default Template. And we'll say Save. Okay. So now we'll go up to File, and we'll go Close. Now if we go File, New, like we just did earlier, you will see that we have a SiteTech Midwest US Survey Foot, and it's got it checked, and it's in default mode. So if we say OK, you'll see we have 3D break lines, points, and layer 0 in the list. And if we go up to Project Settings, you can see that we have under Surface 12.5, so that's what we want to set. So what I want to do before we close out of this, let's go ahead and look at a file that we can show some of those settings. So I'm going to pull up a file that I had been working on and look at some of the approximation settings. So this is a sample project that has a parking lot, and I'm going to turn the grading spots on. And you can see that this is a parking lot. Here's a curb that comes around. Here's elevation 490. And if I come across this parking lot, there's another 490. And it should sheet flow from a straight line grade down to this next row, where you can see the contours are kind of sloped where we get some nice grading. So if I turn on my quick contours, you can see the contours, and these are at a tenth, so we get a little bit of variation in here, but that's typically what you see when you contour out at a tenth. But if you see, we have a straight line grade across here, and we have some settings where this is nice, smooth, and it follows the contours. If we go up to project settings, and let's change this value here to 1 million where it was, and say OK. If we look at these contours now, we do not get real good uniform grading. We get some jaggedness in here, and it just doesn't look uniform. So a lot of people want to set this, and we have not found a reason why we would want this set at 1 million. So if you set this too tight, it can increase the file size of the project. So if you have a lot of surfaces and this is set to 1 foot, your file size is going to be much larger. So a lot of times, the reason this is set, they try to keep the file size down. So let's go to 12.5, say OK, and there we go. So it's back to normal. So that's approximation settings. The other one is the actual setting of 0.05, 0.05 around a horizontal and vertical curve, is how it sets when you go around an arc. So we have a 3D set here, and if we change the settings, let me turn the surface on. So it looks at the approximation. If what that is the distance from this arc to the straight line segment. That is the horizontal approximation. So if we go to project settings, and we look at this horizontal and vertical tolerance of break line approximation, this horizontal tolerance of 0.05, that is what is giving us this distance of how many vertices it puts around this arc. So that's important too. So 0.05 is what Business Center defaults to, and that is what we'd like to see. So let's close this project, and we will not save it. So another nice thing too is when you have the default project set appear at the very top along the quick buttons, you can now hit new, and it'll use our new default project. So that is some basics of Business Center 3.4.